Welcome back to another one of my videos. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Lotta, and today I'm going to show you how I made this vintage style birthday cake for my friend. So last year I made her a strawberry stracciatella cake, which you can see in this video. And this year she requested something with raspberries and also something with yogurt. So underneath all of this whipped cream, there is a stracciatella sponge cake, then a raspberry insert, and a Greek yogurt filling. And I also took a stab at vintage piping, and I think it turned out pretty decent. It's really giving off princess vibes. Now without further ado, let's get into the actual video. Now for the sponge cake, you're going to need 4 room temperature eggs, 125 grams of sugar with a good pinch of salt, 1 package of vanilla sugar or just a good splash of vanilla extract, 125 grams of flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and 50 grams of chocolate sprinkles, but any kind of chocolate really works. Now there's already a video on my channel on the step-by-step how I make my sponge cake. If you want to watch that, it's linked up there. But essentially all we're doing is we're going to whip up our eggs, sugar, salt, and vanilla for about 20 minutes or until it's doubled in size and you can't feel any sugar between your fingers. And in the meantime, we can already sieve together our 2 dry ingredients. Now that our egg mixture is super light and fluffy, we can sieve in our dry ingredients. Now I usually like doing this in 2 batches just to make sure that it doesn't weigh down the eggs. This can wander into the oven that's been preheated to 180 degrees Celsius or 360 degrees Fahrenheit for about 30 minutes. Now before we can make our raspberry layer, we need to do a little bit of prep work. Now essentially what we're going to do is we're going to thicken up our raspberries and then we're going to let it cool so that we kind of have a disc shape that we can just insert into our cake. Now, to do that, you're basically just going to want to find a plate or something that's a little bit smaller than your actual cake. That way it's just easier to do the layering and you can't see the raspberry filling from the outside, which would be ideal. That being said, if you don't have like a plate or a bowl or something that's roughly the same shape as your cake or a little bit smaller, you can also use a cake ring like this and just adjust it to the right size. Now, worst case scenario, if you don't have like a plate or a bowl or like a cake ring or something where you can put your raspberry filling in, you can always just pour it onto a baking tray, and then once that's set, you can use your cake tin to cut out your circles. Now, like I already said, I'm just going to be using these 2 plates. Now, they might be a little bit too big. If they are, I'm just going to cut off a little bit of the excess once they're set. Now essentially all we're doing is wrapping the bottom of our plates with some plastic wrap, and that's just going to make it a lot easier to get it off of our plate because it will stick onto your plate, and it's going to make it a lot easier to handle. Now I wasn't sure if I wanted to do 2 or 3 layers of my filling in my cake, so I think I'm just going to play it safe. I'm going to do 3 layers of my cake and 2 layers of filling, so I'm just going to prep 2 plates. Now I just moved the plates over to the side because we don't need them quite yet. So for the actual raspberry insert, you're going to need 500 grams of raspberries. I'm using frozen raspberries because they're just not in season right now. You're also going to need 20 grams of sugar. You know, you can adjust that depending on how sweet your raspberries are. The juice of half a lemon, 10 grams of gelatin, and just a splash of water to let your gelatin bloom. Now the filling itself is pretty easy. We're just going to start by letting our gelatin bloom with our water. Give it a quick mixy. We can just move this to the side for about 10 minutes to let it bloom. Now in the meantime, we can add the rest of our ingredients into a pot and bring that up to a boil just until the raspberries have kind of fallen apart, and then we're going to give it a quick sieve to get out any of the seeds. Now, if you're using fresh raspberries, you can skip this part, and you're basically just going to quickly puree your fruits, and then you can also sieve out any seeds. Now that we've sieved out all of the seeds, we're going to return this back to the stove, and we're going to let it boil for a couple minutes just until it starts to thicken up just a little bit. Once it's thickened up, we're going to take it off of the heat and let it cool down just a little bit before we mix in our gelatin. These are going to wander into the freezer until they have set, which is probably going to be around an hour or so. If you don't have room in your freezer, you can also put these into the fridge. It's just going to take a little bit longer for them to set completely. Now for the yogurt filling, you're going to need 8 grams of gelatin, and of course a splash of water to let that bloom, 300 milliliters of heavy whipping cream, 400 grams of Greek yogurt. You can also use regular yogurt, it doesn't really make a big difference. 30 grams of powdered sugar, and a good splash of vanilla extract. Now we're going to start by just letting our gelatin bloom with our water. Now while our gelatin blooms, we can already go ahead and whisk up our whipping cream until we have some stiff peaks. And we can also already mix together our vanilla, sugar, and Greek yogurt. Now that our gelatin has bloomed, we're going to heat it up on medium-low heat just until it's melted. Now that our gelatin is melted, we have to temper it. That basically just means we're going to add little dollops of our Greek yogurt mixture and whisk that in order to bring down the temperature of the gelatin before adding it all back into here and giving it a good mix. Now the last thing we have to do is just gently fold in our whipped cream. Now at this point you can also give it a quick try and see if you need to add any more sugar, vanilla, or anything else. Now at this point we're also ready to start layering our cake. So I already went ahead and cut our sponge cake into 3 even layers, and our raspberry inserts have completely set as well. Now to layer this, all we're going to do is grab 1 layer of our sponge, add 1/4 of our filling, 1 layer of our raspberry filling, another 1/4 of our cream filling, and then repeat that with another layer of sponge. Now our cake needs to go into the fridge for at least 4 hours to let the gelatin set, but ideally overnight, which is what I'm going to do, so I'll see you tomorrow when we finish this cake. It's the next day and we can finally finish our cake. So to decorate it and to ice it, you're going to need 500 milliliters of heavy whipping cream, 20 grams of powdered sugar, and of course a good splash of vanilla extract. And we're just going to whip this up until we have some nice stiff peaks. Now at this point we can also get to coloring our whipped cream. So I've decided to do my base color as like a lavender purple, and then I want some pink tones and also some white. So I'm going to just separate a little bit of my whipped cream into some bowls here. This much white, about the same amount for pink. And obviously you want the most whipped cream in the color that's going to be your base. So for me, that's going to be my purple. Now I don't want to do a crumb coat and a top coat, so I'm hoping that if I just put on a nice thick layer of my purple whipped cream, it's going to be good enough that I don't have to do 2 coats. I'm going to let this chill for 20-30 minutes while I get my piping bags ready. Now to get that vintage look, I'm going to be using 4 different piping tips. For my white whipped cream, I'm going to be using a round tip and kind of like a slanted one that I'm going to use to make ruffles. For the pink one, I'm just using a really simple tip. And then for the purple one, I'm going to be using one that kind of has these little edges. Now there's like an endless amount of ways of how you can pipe this, and there's a bunch of different designs that you can do. So I'm not even fully decided on what I'm going to do, so I'll just kind of see what happens. But I'm probably going to start with some ruffles at the bottom and at the top, and then go in with my biggest tip and kind of keep layering it from my bigger tips to my smaller tips. Now I think the piping turned out pretty decent for my first attempt at vintage piping. Now I do think it would be a lot smoother if you used buttercream, which just isn't quite possible with whipped cream. But I think that the whipped cream just fits a little bit better with that yogurty raspberry inside, and the buttercream would just be a little bit overpowering. Now I can't wait for my friend to see this cake, and I really hope that she likes it. So that's going to be everything for today's video. If you enjoyed the video, you can give it a thumbs up or write me a comment down below. And as always, the whole recipe is going to be in the description box as well.